Most people think about the greatest civilizations in history. They usually picture ancient Egypt, right? Greece or Rome. But long before Rome controlled Europe and before Greece became famous for philosophy, one powerful city was already influencing the way human civilization developed, right? Okay, that city was Babylon. Babylon was not just another ancient kingdom that rose and disappeared. It became one of the greatest centers of government, law, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and learning in the ancient world. Some of the ideas developed by the people of Mesopotamia still affect the way we live today. So was Babylon simply another powerful empire? I mean, or was it one of the civilizations that helped create the world we know? Let's talk about it. Like Babylon was located in Mesopotamia near the Euphrates, right, river, and what is now modern day Iraq. The word Mesopotamia means, right, the land between the rivers, referring to the Tigris and the Euphrates, right? These rivers were extremely important because the surrounding region could be dry and difficult to farm. The people living there developed irrigation, right, systems that moved river water into fields. This allowed them to grow crops, support larger populations, and build permanent cities. Mesopotamia was already home to earlier civilizations, including the Sumerians and the Akkadians, right? Babylon did not create everything from the beginning. Instead, it inherited knowledge, traditions, writing systems, and technology from civilizations that came before it. But over time, Babylon became one of the most important cities in the region. One of the rulers most closely connected to Babylon was King Hammurabi, right? Who ruled during the 18th century BCE, right? Hammurabi expanded Babylon's territory and brought several neighboring cities under his control. But today he is best remembered for something known as the Code of Hammurabi. The Code of Hammurabi was a large collection of laws carved onto a stone monument. It included rules about trade, property, marriage, wages, debt, farming, theft, injury, and many other parts of everyday life. You may have heard the phrase an eye for an eye. That idea is often associated with Hammurabi's laws. Now, these laws were not equal or fair by modern standards. Punishments could depend on a person's social class, and some penalties were extremely severe. But the code was still important because it showed that laws could be written down, organized, and publicly presented. A ruler was not simply announcing a random punishment in the moment. The society had a recorded legal structure that people could refer to, right? That does not mean Hammurabi created the first laws in human history. Earlier legal collections existed in Mesopotamia, but his code became one of the most complete and famous surviving examples from the ancient world. Babylon was also a major center of knowledge. Babylonian scholars carefully observed the night sky. They tracked the movement of the moon, stars, and planets. They recorded eclipses and noticed patterns that appeared over long periods of time, right? To the Babylonians, astronomy and astrology were often connected. They believed events in the sky could carry messages about kings, wars, harvests, or the future of the kingdom. Well, look, even though their beliefs were different from modern science, their observations were often incredibly detailed. Later, Greek scholars learned from Mesopotamian astronomy, and that knowledge continued to influence the study of the heavens, right? The Babylonians were also highly skilled in mathematics. They used the number system based partly on the number 60. Think about the number 60. That ancient mathematical tradition is one of the reasons we still divide an hour into 60 minutes, a minute into 60 seconds, and a circle into 360 degrees, right? Think about that for a second. Every time you look at a clock, measure an angle or divide time into minutes and seconds, you are using a system connected to ideas developed thousands of years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. That is how deep Babylon's influence really goes. Babylon later reached another period of greatness under King Nebuchadnezzar, right? The second, who ruled during the 6th century BCE. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon became a massive and impressive capital. The city had enormous defensive walls, temples, palaces, gates, and ceremony roads. One of its most famous structures was the Ishtar Gate, right? The gate was decorated with bright blue glazed bricks and images of lions, bulls, and mythical creatures. It stood near a ceremonial road used for religious processions, right? Imagine entering an ancient city and seeing giant walls covered in shiny blue bricks surrounded by images of powerful animals. What? For visitors arriving from smaller towns, Babylon must have looked like almost unbelievable. You'd be like, oh, wow, but look, Nebuchadnezzar is also connected to one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And forgive me if I'm, misspelling. Ancient Greek and Roman writers describe gardens built on raised terraces filled with trees, flowers, plants, and flowing water. The gardens supposedly appeared to hang above the city, which is why they became known as the Hanging Gardens. Follow me. I hope y'all follow me with this. Look, they were later listed as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But there was a problem. This is the problem. Archaeologists have never found definite evidence proving that the gardens existed in Babylon, exactly as later writers described them. Some historians believe the gardens were real, but have not yet been located. Okay, others think the descriptions became exaggerated over time. Another theory suggests that the famous gardens may have actually been located in the Assyrian city of Nineveh, and were later mistakenly connected to Babylon. So were the Hanging Gardens real? Were they located somewhere else? Or were they an ancient story that grew more spectacular every time it was repeated? We still do not know for certain. Right? Babylon also appears in the Hebrew Bible, especially in stories involving the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. All right, it's another story. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian army captured Jerusalem, destroyed the first temple, and forced many people from the kingdom of Judah into exile. Because of this history, Babylon became a powerful symbol in biblical tradition. It was sometimes presented as a place of pride, corruption, oppression, and human arrogance. That religious image became so influential that many people today hear the word Babylon and immediately think of sin, destruction, or rebellion against God. But the historical Babylon was much more complicated. It was a real city filled with farmers, builders, merchants, priests, soldiers, scribes, astronomers, and families. It was a place of both conquest and creativity. It could be brutal like many ancient empires, but it was also one of the world's greatest centers of knowledge and culture. And that's what I find interesting, right? Despite its power, Babylon did not last forever. But who does, right? In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great Persia conquered the city. According to several ancient accounts, Babylon was captured with relatively little destruction. Cyrus allowed the city to continue functioning, and Babylon remained important under the Persian rule. But over the centuries, political power shifted elsewhere, of course. New capitals became more important, trade routes changed, buildings were abandoned, damaged, or reused. Eventually, the great city declined. The temples became ruins. The palaces collapsed. The famous walls disappeared. Sand, soil, and time slowly covered what remained. But Babylon never completely disappeared. Its laws influence the way people think about justice and government. Its mathematics still affects our clocks and measurements. Its astronomers help build the foundation for later scientific observations. Its architecture became legendary, and its name survived in history, religion, literature, music, and culture. Babylon reminds us that the ancient world was not primitive or empty. These people were studying the sky, solving mathematical problems, managing large cities, writing legal codes, building monumental structures, and preserving knowledge on clay tablets thousands of years ago. They were asking many of the same questions we still ask today. How should society be organized? What makes a ruler legitimate? How can we measure time? What can the stars tell us? How do we preserve knowledge for future generations? Babylon may have fallen, but its influence is still around us. And that leads to an even bigger question. How many other ancient civilizations have shaped our modern world without receiving the recognition they deserve? This is why ancient history matters. It is not simply a collection of old names, ruins, and dates. It is a story of how humanity learned to build cities, create laws, study nature, and record knowledge, and imagine something greater than the world that already existed. Babylon was not perfect. It was not peaceful. And it was not the first civilization. But it became one of the most influential cities the ancient world had ever seen. A city of kings, city of laws, a city of astronomy, mathematics, religion, architecture, and mystery. An empire that eventually disappeared from power, but never truly disappeared from human civilization. So the next time you look at a clock, measure a circle, and hear the phrase "an eye for an eye," or read a story about the hanging gardens, remember that part of Babylon is still with us. And maybe the ancient world was far more advanced, connected, and influential than we have been taught to believe, right? All right, this is the conscious signal. Question reality, explore history, and never stop searching for what may have been forgotten. Until next time.